Hello, my name again is Sister Ocean. I'm visiting here, a traveling homeless monastic, so I don't have home base, but technically Toronto is my home base. I've had a really beautiful few weeks here and feel so grateful for the practice in the community. And then with the invitation to come share today, I said, well, okay. So thank you for this space and time to share. I ordained into the Thich Nhat Hanh tradition. We call it the Plum Village tradition, or many other names. And so the way that I'm going to be sharing is very influenced by this tradition. And in this community, we start really any talk by saying, Dear Thai, Dear Sangha. Thai being the Vietnamese word for teacher. So I say, Dear teacher, dear Sangha, dear community. Both to acknowledge that what's being shared here comes from what I've learned from teachers, from Thich Nhat Hanh, all the way back up to the time of the Buddha. And to remember that we're part of this lineage, this continuation. But also to acknowledge that we all have many teachers and many traditions that we're part of. So I want to start by acknowledging and welcoming all the traditions that we're carrying. And we all have teachers within us. So even though I'm sitting here and you're there, we're all teachers and students together. And I just want to set that out for this beginning of a time of sharing. And if there's any ancestors, any inner teachers that you're wanting to be in touch with a little more, just give yourself time for a breath to see what of your roots, what of the different lineages you're part of are feeling present right now. Maybe give them a smile. Maybe turn off cell phones. Take an extra moment for that. Perfect timing. If you're wanting to shift, the speaker is over here. If it's easier to hear, there are some chairs empty next to the speaker. So that's always a possibility too. I also want to acknowledge that the land is an ancestor, and the peoples who have lived on these lands and all the beings are part of our ancestors who are here, especially the Cherokee people. There's also the history of enslaved people. There's history of settler people. There's a lot of pain and resilience that comes in this land that is part of us being here today. And the intention, at least for my part of sharing Dharma, is for us to take steps towards healing, towards wisdom, towards learning to live with mutual respect, when that hasn't always been the case. So all of these intentions are here as we start in this time of practice together. And if there are other intentions you want to hold in your heart, or other aspects of yourself, pain, difficulties, it's all welcome. You don't have to be anyone other than yourself. Just being here is already a lot. So thank you for being here. I want to offer some reflections today on bowing and gratitude. So not only are there the words of Dear Thai, Dear Sangha, but you probably saw me come in and bow to the chair, bow to all of you. If you saw me come in earlier, and also some of the other sisters in residence here, bow to the Buddha when we come in, bow to our seats. And for a lot of folks not raised in a Buddhist culture, it can be a little confusing, sometimes off-putting, sometimes inspiring. But I find that actually talking about what does this mean, or what's this all about, can be really helpful, whether you choose to take the practice or not. So I want to talk about to bow or not to bow. That is not the question. Coming from a Vietnamese Zen tradition, it's different than Japanese Zen, but it has a lot of the similar roots of Chan in China. We train not only in the specific reflection and meditations of training the mind, but also in putting our body into a shape that helps to support the mind's cultivation. And so the first thing I want to say about bowing is that it's a chance to bring body and mind together symbolically by bringing the palms together. If you're interested, you're welcome to try that. Think of this as Maybe my right hand represents my body, and left hand represents the mind, and they aren't separate, but they feel a little different. And then bringing them together as a chance to check in. Am I really present with body and mind? It doesn't matter what the answer is, it's just a check-in. Does that make sense? Yeah. So that's one way that many of us practice bowing, just like, oh, am I really present? Check. And we do it in small ways throughout the day. And then when we bow to a person, there's a little mini poem that we recite to ourselves silently. A lotus to you, a Buddha to be. Lotus being a symbol of awakening. It can only grow up in the mud. So it's not expecting perfection or difference, but just that remembering everyone has the potential for awakening. We all have the potential for awakening. We have seeds of awakening that are growing at various stages in their growth, but we all have the seeds. And so if you're ever interested in taking on bowing to a person as a practice, it's a chance to get in touch with remembering, the seed of awakening, Buddha nature, Christ consciousness, true love is a potential that everybody carries, whatever their behavior is. The seed is always there, and it's easy to forget, so sometimes we need help to remember. And this bowing can be a really heartfelt, just bringing our highest selves to remember the highest selves in those around us. So if you ever see anyone bowing to someone else, that's one way of thinking of what's happening there as a respectful, loving greeting. If you're ever inspired to try it, you're welcome, but there's, again, no forcing. I wanted to get into some of the smaller bows of like bowing to a seat, bowing to food, bowing to a Buddha statue. Ultimately, it's a training in not just pausing to be mindful in a potentially mechanistic sense of, okay, stop what else I'm thinking about and just pay attention to this object or the breath, which has a lot of value. But what's the point of following one's breath and setting aside other thoughts if it's not to create a space for perhaps love, perhaps joy, perhaps gratitude, some of the wholesome states of mind. We create space from the unwholesome states of mind to help wholesome states of mind arise that are both enjoyable but also supportive for our communities and can do a lot of good in the world. So in preparing to invite the sound of a bell, the tradition I come from has me silently, but I'll tell you what I'm saying silently to myself. Take a pause and just check, am I really present for this act I'm about to do? With body, speech, and mind in perfect oneness, I send my heart along with the sound of this bell. May the hearers awaken from forgetfulness and transcend the path of anxiety and sorrow. Listening to the sound of a bell, we have this little poem, Listen, Listen. This wonderful sound brings me back to my true home. And what's a true home? Thomas Merton might call it a true self. The Buddha might call it non-self or emptiness. Some people might call it unconditional love or wisdom. So these little reminders we can train ourselves in. When drinking something, there's a little poem. The intention is to use two hands to again bring all of body and mind together for even something as simple as drinking water or tea. This cup of water in my two hands is mindfulness held perfectly upright, My mind and body dwell in the very here and now. And were I standing and coming to my seat, bowing to the cushion, the gatha, the verse, is sitting here. It's like sitting under the Bodhi tree. My body is mindfulness itself, free from all delusion. So I'm not going to ask anyone to memorize anything. If you are interested in more of this practice, you can ask some of the sisters with robes like mine here about where to find the written words. What I've come to find is that this practice has been one of the most transformational things that I've found in my life. The formal sitting and walking and chanting are so wonderful, and then it's so easy off the cushion, out of the Dharma hall, to slip into forgetfulness. And so these small trainings of come back, come back, come back throughout the day have really transformed my life. And so I'm always excited to talk about the gathas and the bow. And I love doing it. It's not forced. It's not something that I'm obliged to do. I don't think anyone should ever be obliged to take on a bowing practice. But I'm sharing as an invitation. If something touches your heart, you can find your own way to take up a bowing practice that's formless or with a form. And for me, there's 3 key pieces. One is the pause. Check, what's going on? Am I present? The second is to see, is there a way to cultivate a bit more gratitude here for simple things that I usually ignore or overlook? And the third is, can I get a little more aligned with what we would call right view or deep wisdom understanding? Which we're not going to get into in large detail, but just to touch upon. So the pause, the present mind body as one, seeing if it's possible. I don't even force myself to let go of other thoughts, but I ask myself, can I be a little more present now? Because I find when I tell myself, concentrate, pay attention, I get really judgmental, and then the mind is sort of like a 2-year-old who starts a temper tantrum and says, no, I'm not going to do that. But if I come in gently and say, hey, can you be a little more present right now? It tends to respond a lot more obligingly. So you can see what kind of check-in helps you to actually be a little more present. The gratitude I'm going to dive into quite a bit, but again, just to start off by saying that it's a question and it's an invitation. Is there space for a little more gratitude or aliveness, appreciation in something small that I've overlooked? Not I should be grateful because that's what spiritual people are supposed to do. Because sometimes that attitude comes across, and sometimes I try to force it on myself, and it doesn't work very well either. Or some small little drop of awe or wonder, because as Brother David Stendhal-Rast, the Benedictine monk who's been involved with interfaith work for decades and decades, he likes to say, no, we're not going to be grateful for everything that happens, but in every moment we can find something. And it's the practice of turning towards the wholesome. It's a small way to keep turning the mind towards a positive state of mind. And if it's done out of, oh, I don't want to think about that painful thing, that's not gratitude. That's suppression and denial, which all of us do at some point. So the point of seeing that is not to beat ourselves up, but to get clarity. Oh, I didn't realize this was denial here, not true gratitude. And then to learn from that and just go, oh, I wonder if there's another way. Or then there's the excitement of like, oh, this is so great. I want to go take a picture of this. I want to tell everybody. And that might seem like gratitude too, but it's actually mind chatter. It's not the embodied experience of, wow. Can you get that difference? It's really important, I've found. And when we open into that, wow, it's a really easy mind state to then shift or continue to open into this right understanding, this, in my tradition, we would, Thich Nhat Hanh created a word called interbeing as a way to explain that nothing exists on its own. Everything is interdependent, which is another way of explaining emptiness or non-self. There's no separate me aside from my parents and all my teachers and the air that I breathe, which is also connected to the air that you breathe. And so when does it really stop being me and you? And we're all descendants of millions of years of evolution, and we all have similar ancestors. And so we're all related. And like two hands, we're not the same, but we're not separate. Part of the same body of life, right? So the more that I've practiced these bows, this pausing practice, the more it just takes me into that pause, to gratitude or wonder, into a different way of looking at the world. And sometimes it's really helpful to go through the sutra study and analyze the words and definitions. And I will have a few definitions for you today. But sometimes that just keeps practice in the head level. And ideas are never really going to totally transform the heart-mind stream and transform how we actually encounter the world, change our perspective from isolation and separateness into connectedness and reciprocity and interdependence. And it's so easy to say, oh yeah, gratitude sounds nice, but that's a light practice. It's not as important as the other stuff. And I just like to pose that maybe it's as important as everything else. The Buddha didn't put gratitude in his lists, or I haven't found any the main list that include gratitude. And sometimes I go, gratitude should be one of the perfections. It's definitely a perfection in my experience. But I find it's a natural result. It's a natural thing that wells up from the heart when generosity is flowing. Gratitude's right there. Even practicing precepts and ethical trainings, there's this joy of integrity, where the Buddha talks of the bliss of blamelessness that has its own wellness. And I find when I am in that space of the bliss of blamelessness, I feel grateful to be able to live in a way that's ethical, to be able to have received teachings, to have the inner motivation and outer conditions that have supported me. I can go through the whole list, I don't need to, but I've realized, okay, gratitude springs up from so many of the other qualities. Maybe that's why it's not on the lists. But I did find a few passages where the Buddha talks of gratefulness. In the Dulabha Sutta, hard to find, the Buddha says, these two people are hard to find in the world. Which two? The one who is first to do a kindness, and the one who is grateful and thankful for a kindness done. Yeah, it's actually not that common, although we all have the potential. In the Katanyu Sutta, Katanyu being the word for gratitude or thankfulness, the beginning says, now the Buddha says, now what is the level of a person of no integrity? A person of no integrity is ungrateful and unthankful. This ingratitude, this lack of thankfulness, is advocated by rude people. It's entirely on the level of no integrity. A person of integrity is grateful and thankful. This gratitude, this thankfulness, is advocated by civil people. It is entirely on the level of people with integrity. And then also in the Mahamangala Sutta of blessings, there's all these lists of the highest blessings. And in the 8th verse, reverence, humility, contentment, gratitude, and timely hearing of the Dhamma is the highest blessing. And I like that list because it kind of fleshes out what kind of gratitude we're talking about. Reverence, humility in the sense of being like the earth, that is stable and neither hides nor needs to boast. I think of humility as being absence of superiority, inferiority, or even in Dharma we speak of equality complex. We're not comparing ourselves. To be humble, that's how I understand it. We're not putting ourselves above, but we're also not pushing ourselves below. It's this no need to compare, cleanness, smoothness of energy that infuses gratitude, contentment. If we're always seeking after something else, I know, I find myself in it all the time, seeking after something better, even if it's only a better cup of tea. That tendency is so ingrained in the human psyche and especially fed by mainstream society. It's not, we don't need to have it come from the outside being told that there's something bad about wanting more. We can come into our own experience, embodied experience of what does it feel like when I'm wanting more or when I'm wanting to push something else away. There's an agitation, even when it's subtle. There's a tension, there's an anxiety, there's a stress of mind. And contentment doesn't mean that everything in our situation is good. It means that inside there's been a settling, an ability to find a warm light, something. The contentment comes from within. It's not based upon circumstances. And that's where gratitude springs out of. That's where the highest kind of gratitude springs out of. The definition of katanyu as grateful or obliging, sometimes loaded words, so I prefer grateful than obliging. But it actually has roots in the sense of to be aware of what has been done, which is very similar to mindfulness, which is also a remembering. And it's often used in combination of a term katave, and it's like aware of what has been given. So I really just how to pull this together. There's a phrase I really like by, does anyone know Rob Bell? He's a Christian teacher. But there's just this little phrase that he said one day I heard on his podcast. Really simple. That breath you just took, that's a gift. Which we get to in our Buddhist practice, but the way he said it, he's kind of quite irreverent, kind of funny, surfer guy in California, former megachurch pastor. But just his way of being like, the lightness in it, of like, that breath you just took, that's a gift. The way he said it just stuck with me, and I knew that I'd been cultivating that awareness through Dharma practice for years and years and years, but I like the phrasing of it, that we didn't create the air we breathe. Even the very fact of breathing, we're receiving something. And when the mind shifts to the attitude of gratitude, like, oh, this is received, it can brighten the heart mind without this heavy weightedness of, oh, I have to be beholden to someone or something else. Tanisaro Bhikkhu writes that gratitude literally means to have a sense of what was done. Oh, sorry, I erased something. Our parents' instructions to us when we were children to remember the kindness of others might have been our first lessons in mindfulness. Not everyone's parents taught this, but probably somewhere you were taught this. Just like, it requires a little stretch of the mind. We don't often automatically remember that, oh, this chair I'm sitting on was made by people and maybe machines, and someone had to buy it and bring it here. And because of that, I get to have a comfortable seat instead of sitting on concrete. And even if I was sitting on concrete, someone had to make the concrete, and the earth produced the substances that were turned into concrete. And like, even to have something to sit on, if we turn the mind towards, how am I receiving something here that came from so many different directions, it's possible to tap into this openness, this reverence, this contentment in the smallest ways. So I'd like to invite you to look at the clothing you're wearing and take a minute to just reflect on, wondering how many conditions and causes, beings of different types came together for us to have clothes to wear and be warm today and sheltered from elements. So take a minute. You can look, or you can close your eyes, do whatever. You can touch it, whatever helps you get in touch with this bigger reality in something as simple as the clothing that we're wearing. I'll give a bell to begin and to end. I wonder if anyone wants to share anything from the reflection.
I just had to go back with my socks to Ireland, and all the places that I had to go to get there. You notice the animals that gave the covering, and the people that did the work to create the socks. You know, because it came in the and it started right there with the socks. And suddenly it was in Ireland. And I was with people in Ireland, and what did they get to bring the socks to me? Because I don't think about when I put that on.
Thank you.
A similar pattern of recognizing that my pants are made of cotton cotton was grown in fields. Someone had to plant it, till it, de-weed the fields, eventually harvest the cotton, bring it into the storehouses, somehow clean it, thresh it, whatever, turn it into a weave fabric, and then different skill set, different kinds of people came in to turn that fabric and cut it into pants. People thought about what are the common sizes that people need, men's sizes, women's sizes, what does a stylish pant look like? All this going into the pair of pants that I currently have on me today.
Okay, and interesting you mentioned cotton, such a loaded history of the plant. Yeah, it's all here.
Like you, I just placed my hand on it, but you just quietly, without expectation of with the ego mind, wanting to contemplate something deep, just being present. And much the way that you experienced your recognition, so many of the clothes we wear are made by children. They're made by people in sweatshops, living horrific existence, getting paid minuscule amounts of money to live on. And so there's a lot of stress, heart stress related to the clothes we Americans enjoy and don't live lifestyle. And so it's an opportunity for me to really stop. We could have a whole meditation and prayer day just looking in the closet. Because someone's heart, someone else's hands, and perhaps a machine, but those times, some really hard-working hands that have a heart just like ours, and goals and dreams and families and want to find their home God. So to me, I find it like you dip into the melodies. You can use them as your prayer block. You just get back in touch and give gratitude back to the hands that prepared everything around my life. Thank you. Thank you for leading us to that place.
Thank you so much, and I so appreciate the depth of everyone's reflections, but this brings actually beautifully into a further point that, this pause, look deeply, open in reverence, it doesn't always bring us to happy things, right? Dhamma practice brings us in touch with reality, all of it. And yet I find the resiliency that comes out of being able to just keep opening gives me more capacity to be present for all of it, right? It's just, this is the reality. Don't have to like it, and we can do work to change it. But right here and now, pretending and needing to pretend that something different is real definitely keeps us in suffering. It's a pretty direct path, even if it feels a little easier in the moment. The Dhamma's pretty clear. Avoiding reality is delusion, and it's the foundation of suffering. And yet the more we're able to turn to face reality, to open up to reality that arises within us, that we learn from others, we can actually find more freedom, more resilience, more contentment, unconditional contentment. And when that's there, then there's a freedom for these small and large gratitudes to arise. Again, Brother Davis Stendhal Rast, in his, I think, 96th year or so this year, in his wisdom, gratefulness is the key to a happy life that we hold in our hands, because if we are not grateful, then no matter how much we have, we will not be happy. We'll always want something else or something more. It's just observing reality. If we're always wanting something else or something more, we're always going to be stressed. We'll take it out on our neighbors and the planet. And something else is possible. Something else is possible. Let me just see. So I wanted to give us a little bit more time for this embodied exploration of gratitude. And I want you to spend another minute or so, or just, actually, I think we'll open it up. A lot of the times as I've dived into practice and I've struggled with terms and ideas, and I'm like, I don't know what that means, or I can imagine 20 different versions of interpreting this passage. Time and again, I find that coming back to the experience in the body gives me a lot more trustworthiness in understanding Dhamma and practice than trying to get my brain to figure it out with concepts and thoughts. And I find this is really true with gratitude. I started to mention it, but I want to see, when I say false gratitude, as in forced niceness, fakeness, or a sense of entitlement, that's entitlement. Assuming that things are owed to us and we don't need to give any gratitude back, or respect or reverence as a version of grasping, or the greed of holding on to things and the possessiveness, thinking that we actually own things. All these different versions of either, I think of them as near or far enemies of gratitude. We don't have to just, there's traditional teachings around what are called the Brahma Viharas, the immeasurable minds of love, compassion, kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity. And the traditional teachings includes what are called near and far enemies. The near enemies kind of like, it looks like it, but it's not quite. The far enemy is the opposite. I like to think of near and far enemies of all sorts of things to help me understand, have I really gotten in touch with the essence of it? So for gratitude, I find a near enemy would be entitlement or niceness. There's like, oh, I received it, but without an exchange. Or, oh, thank you so much, that was great. But there's no heart in it, right? And so I wonder, have any of you, can you think of a time when you've experienced a sort of false gratitude? And what does that feel like in your body? Does that make sense as a question? Yeah. So take a moment, and then I'm going to ask for some feedback of if you think of a time when there's been some false, superficial gratitude. And if that comes up, is there something in the body that shows up? And would you be willing to share?
I think a good example for me of false gratitude would be social norms, a good bit of customs. For instance, I make it a point whenever I eat out a good bit, whenever someone feeds me, to thank them for that. Well, sometimes I mean it, and then sometimes it's just performing.
So can you think of a time when there was performing, and is there a sense that comes up in the body, like a physical, a tension, a pulsing, like what is it actually, does that make sense?
Yeah. I have a strong awareness of the sincerity and the falseness, which makes it difficult to follow the norms sometimes.
Yeah. So can you describe what false thanks feels like in the body?
Not in a head guy, it's not.
That's okay, I don't...
It feels like maybe like a little bit an imagined constriction. The falseness feels like an imagined constriction somewhere right along in here. And also,
a constriction in the chest.
I experience things in my sinuses around where my sinuses are.
Yeah, I can even see the little tension in your eyebrows. Yeah.
The third-eyed white flesh.
Yeah, thank you. Did anyone else notice anything physical that comes up with a sense of false gratitude?
Sometimes, to me, it's almost an absence.
An absence?
Where true gratitude, there's a warmth, there's a love, there's a compassion, the drama of the heart, as you feel that, physically, viscerally, when it's genuine gratitude, when it's just a convention, frequently those are absence. It's almost a hollowness.
A hollowness, emptiness, or lack. I'm just repeating in case people can't hear clearly. Thank you.
I'll
Second that. I wonder if it has a bit of numbing. For me, that's sometimes present. Yeah.
That's what I was going to say.
Oh, okay.
I feel like sort of a block, a disconnect with myself, my body, when I'm getting a false praise.
Thank you. And so the next question, you've already moved into it, is what does genuine gratitude feel like in the body? And can you give like physical details, if anyone's willing to share? You were starting to get to it, this
For me, most fundamentally, it's love.
love. So what does that feel like in your body as sensation? Not all the time, but like right now.
Warmth.
Warmth. Thank you. Yeah.
It can bring tears to my eyes.
It can bring tears to the eyes. Yeah.
Lightness and exhilaration in the heart. And kind of that sense of awe when the sunset.
An exhilaration in the heart.
Physiological response
Yeah.
is,
Yeah.
wow. You feel like
Seems a feeling of real connection.
Connection.
Feeling a real connection with maybe a person or just in a realization of what this is beyond what it is.
Realization. Yeah, and so it's even like connectedness. Is there something more physiological that you could describe?
Anytime I feel that connectedness, it brings there's a wave of something that arises. It often leads
A
to
wave.
a feeling of emotion
Yeah.
or being choked up.
Thank you.
Softness.
Softness, tenderness. Yeah. So I don't mean to be grilling people, but I find the more specific one can get with like what does this, the actual physical experience, the more, at least I, and I think others, can check in and go like, oh, well, what state am I actually in? And if I notice myself in falseness, I can take a pause and be like, oh, is there space for a little more genuine gratitude? And actually just like focus on softness in my heart and see if actually shifting the body, just like bringing the hands together, shifting the, like releasing a bit of tension in my heart, does that actually help me to be a little more fully present and offer a presence of gratitude as opposed to this, the social convention of nicety that's so perfectly said. And isn't it interesting that when we're in a falsity, there is this numbness, there is a blocking of our interconnectedness, right? And when there is a bit of numbness to our interconnectedness, there might also be some blocking and numbness to all the other rest of the Buddha's teachings. We might be shutting down to information that's coming in from around us, and we might not even notice that we're acting in ways that are dismissive, that are disrespectful, that are causing harm to others, that then come back to us. We don't even notice what's going on when we're numbed out, but we're so used to it because we often get trained in society. It's a survival strategy. We don't need to judge and blame ourselves for it, but we can know it, see where it causes harm, and train in something else. We're gonna,
I was going to say, I think sometimes too, there's this numbness where in receiving the gratitude, so there may also be a block in the body of whether it's false or true of us not wanting to receive it. But when there's that awareness of receiving a true gratitude and allowing that to come in the body, there's a physical exchange of exchange. So also receiving the gratitude and knowing that there's not this other end, but there's also this two-way connection and the heart connection that just comes out like at the front of the chest. So also to be able to receive.
Yeah, thank you. I actually spoke to a quote that I think I must have erased because I couldn't find it here, but this, like, what allows us to be, what supports us in being able to offer and receive. If we go back to that first quote of the Buddha, why is it hard to find people who both do a kindness and are thankful for kindness done? I think it speaks to what if we're resistant to receiving, or if something's being given in a way that feels creepy, like, oh, we're not going to want to receive it. Or if we're concerned about not having enough and we're living in fear, sometimes for really important reasons. Still, there's going to, like, we don't have a sense that we can give, and so if someone's given to us, it touches all the buttons of, like, our own sense of lack and fear, and it's a really deep practice. It takes really deep inner work to give and to receive freely and truly, because it touches on the deepest core. Greed, aversion, and delusion all get us caught in false giving. And freedom, a moment's freedom from greed, craving, and delusion, opens us up for this real exchange. Could go on and on and on, but don't want to keep you too long. And I do want to end with a song about gratitude. And there's going to be a part in it where I invite everyone to speak out gratitudes in your life. But I want to give us a moment to reflect on this before. Usually I just bring it on people. But I thought to make it a Dharma contemplation, you know, if you've ever done gratitude lists or gratitude journaling, or even in other ways of thinking about gratitude, whatever comes to mind is fine. And as Dharma practitioners, I think it's worthy to reflect on what does come up as our gratitudes, because when things go well, it's easy to be grateful for those things. But this deeper cultivation of contentment is a training in opening to the stuff we don't usually notice. I mean, even a sunset, the energy of, like, oh, that's so gorgeous, I want to take a photo. It's not what we're talking about, but the energy of, oh, look what's being offered. I'm going to receive it. It's like leaning back, open-handedness. For me, that's a gesture that I find, like, if something in my heart kind of wants to do this, I know I'm aligned with that inner contentment. So see if there are a few kind of gratitudes that you can get in touch with. And at the end of the song, when I say, please speak out your thanks, because the song is called Give Thanks. If you'd like to speak them out loud, you're really welcome. And it's not to chastise the sort of more common, conventional gratitudes, but to train ourselves. Check in. Deeper contentment. Maybe just a moment of freedom from the three poisons. Because a moment that is free from greed, hatred, and delusion is a moment of nirvana. It's a moment of true freedom that's worthy of being celebrated and known. And when we know it in the body, we're really with it. It comes and goes, it's okay. But don't ignore it. Yeah, okay. Those of you who already have learned this song are welcome to sing along. The chorus is really easy. We've got to give thanks for all these blessings. Got to give thanks for all these blessings. So if singing feels supportive to your practice of joy and gratitude or ease and contentment, you're so welcome to join. And if it doesn't support your contentment, you are not obliged to sing along. For the great gray sea and the bright shining sun, for the wind and the rain and enough air for everyone, we've got to give thanks for all these blessings. Got to give thanks for all these blessings. For the green grass in spring and the brown leaves in fall, for the winter's branches bare and the summers we've grown up tall, we've got to give thanks for all these blessings. Got to give thanks for all these blessings. For eyes that can see and lungs that can breathe, for bones that hold us tall and a heart that can beat, we've got to give thanks for all these blessings. Got to give thanks for all these blessings. For patience and kindness and the courage to take wise action, and even the pain that leads to letting go, and understanding and compassion. We've got to give thanks for all these blessings. Got to give thanks for all these blessings. You're welcome to speak out any blessings that you wish.
For those I live with and those who visit. Sangha.
Our venerables.
They are
Who got to give thanks for all these blessings. Got to give thanks for all these blessings. So in the coming week and year and new decade, my wish and hope for us all is to become people who are hard to find, people who are grateful and quick to give. first to do a kindness and thankful for a kindness done. And may this way of being in the world be of benefit to all beings. Thank you so much. I'm going to invite 3 sounds of the bell first. Just let this sink in.